Hey everybody, Brian here. In the last video I showed you how I converted a 15-year-old or so Windows XP computer that I hadn't turned on for a few years to work as a virtual machine on a new computer. In that case I showed you how to do that using VMware Fusion on a Mac, which turned out to be a very retro experience with the added benefit of seeing about a 700% performance increase, which is pretty awesome. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do the same thing, but now we're going to do it on VMware Workstation Pro on a Windows machine. So let's see how to do that. It's pretty wild, isn't it? Running XP in 2024 on an Intel 14700K. Yeah, I know, everybody hates Intel. Anyway, let's get to it. So Workstation Pro, it's to Windows what Fusion is to the Mac. So they're very similar and the procedure is going to be almost identical, just some nuances. So we'll go through that. I won't redo the process of using the VMware Standalone converter. In the first video I showed you how to use that. So once you've done that conversion, you end up with a file on whatever drive you chose for the conversion to do its saving. I use a USB drive. So that VMware Standalone converter produced this folder called Audio System. You can ignore this .pvm, that's from when I was using a Parallels converter. So yours will be called something different. The main thing is just to make sure you have what you need in place. So these VMDK files correspond to each disk that you chose during the conversion process. I chose a system disk, as well as an audio and a samples disk. And you end up with this .vmx file as well. That's what we can open to actually run the VM. But before you do that, you need to make sure you have VMware Workstation Pro installed in Windows. So what you do is you just do a search for VMware Workstation Download, then you'll see there's a VMware blog. So I clicked on that, and then scroll down. In the previous video we downloaded Fusion Pro, now we're just going to download Workstation Pro. I'm already logged in, but when you first go to that link, you might have to create a Broadcom account if you don't already have one. And then when you log in for the first time, you'll see some icon here indicating what kind of products you're set to browse. By default, I think it's set to mainframe software or something. It's not going to be set to VMware Cloud Foundation, so you have to set that. And then one way you can navigate to that download is to just make sure you have My Download selected. Again, you have to make sure VMware Cloud Foundation is set here. And then just look for VMware Workstation Pro. And then look for personal use Windows. Here it is. And then the latest version, 17.6 as of this recording. And then you'll see this entry with a download symbol. And I'm seeing the cursor over it. When you first come here, you're going to see a circle with a line through it. It's not going to let you download. And you're going to see a little message up here with a little checkbox telling you to confirm your account or something. So you have to make sure you check that off. I've already done that, that's why I'm not seeing anything here. And after you've done that, you'll then be able to download. So that circle with a line through it will then become this cursor. So you click there. And then you'll see a message that your download started. And you'll see that happening in your downloads. So I'll skip ahead, I've already downloaded it. So I downloaded the VMware Workstation Pro, put it on my desktop, and once you have it in place somewhere, just open that installer. Yes. And then next. I accept the terms, even though I don't know what they are, but I'm not afraid. Next. Keep that as is. Next. I don't think I want to join this customer experience improvement program. I know, I'm that kind of person. Next. Keep that as is, next, and then install, and finish. I'm going to go back to my USB drive where VMware converters stored those files, and I don't want to work off the USB drive, I want to put them onto a local folder.
Hey Richard, just making some copies.
Okay, so under my documents I created this Win XP VMware folder, and I'm just going to drag the folder from the USB drive over. And that'll take a little while, so I'll skip ahead. There I have it, my folder is copied over, and inside is everything I need, the .vmdk files and the .vmx. At this point, to actually run XP in VMware Workstation for the first time, we can just double click this .vmx. So I'm going to do that, and hope nothing bad happens. Actually, that doesn't launch it. We still have to hit this power on this virtual machine button. So I'm going to do that, and then later we're going to change some settings. At this point, we just want to make sure we can actually get into XP. And we'll have to take an action a little later to stop this message from appearing regarding side channel mitigation. So just hit OK. A message about an IDE1 device that might be related to the CD DVD settings. We can change that a little later and prevent this message from happening. So for now, just hit yes. A warning about that IDE1 device, just close out of that. And in the meantime, XP looks like it's launching in this tiny little window. I'll resize that. Later we'll make some display changes. And I'm getting some messages that I think have to do with some programs I need to uninstall. So resizing didn't improve things here. For now, let me just go to Properties, Settings, and it's set to 640 by 480, which probably doesn't make sense on a computer, right? So we'll change this 1920 by 1080. And you have to press Control-Alt if you want to get the mouse to move outside of this window. We'll change that behavior in a little bit. Okay, so we confirm that we can get into XP. You'll see these hardware wizard found messages. You can just hit cancel. There might be 2 of them. Those have to do with some drivers that we need to have VMware install. But in order for it to do that, it needs the so-called VMware tools. And by the way, we're seeing a message here about VMware tools. For now, just hit remind me later. Okay, so the display still is not ideal to work with. And we're getting a message to restart the computer. Ignore that for now. Let's go to VMware, Settings, Display. I'm going to change this to stretch mode, keep aspect ratio, okay. And under settings, I'm going to change this to something a little smaller. Okay, so now we can see things a little better. Now's a good time to check drivers. I'm going to go to Start, Settings, Control Panel, System, Hardware, Device Manager. Remember we saw those 2 hardware found messages. Those are corresponding to these 2 annoying yellow triangles. To get rid of those annoying yellow triangles, we want to install VMware Tools. If you go to VM, you'll see Install VMware Tools. You click that, and obviously you're going to think it's going to install those tools. Instead, you get this message in XP because it's a legacy system, and it tells you to download it manually. So I'm going to click here. There's nothing shady going on. It's not some kind of backdoor trap. It's going to destroy your computer. So I click that, and that automatically downloaded it. And I dragged that downloaded file to my desktop. There it is. It's called winprevista.iso. We want to be able to run this setup program in the VM. And we can't drag and drop at this point. That functionality is not working without VMware tools. But what we can do is we can go to VM, Removable Devices, CD, DVD, and go to Settings. Boot up, remember you were seeing that IDE1 error. That's because of the connection we have here. It thinks there's a physical drive. So I'm going to go to Use ISO Image File, Browse, and I'm going to choose this file on my desktop. Here it is, winprevista.iso. Open, and now hit OK. And that wasn't enough to get it to appear here in my computer because we actually have to connect the drive now. So go to VM, Removable Devices, CD DVD, Connect, go back to my computer. Now here it is, VMware Tools. So now we can double click that, and there's the setup. So just run that .exe. Don't be scared, there's nothing harmful going on here. And hit Next. Typical, Next, Install, Finish. I'm not going to restart the computer for now. Since we're here, we can also remove any programs we don't need. We saw our message on boot up regarding some program couldn't be loaded or something. I think that has to do with some programs that I need to uninstall. And you might have a similar situation where you didn't want to uninstall something on the physical machine, but it doesn't make sense to have certain programs running on the VM. Go to Start, Settings, Control Panel, Add or Remove Programs. In my case, this AI suite I think is causing some trouble. It's producing those error messages on startup. So just make sure you remove any programs that have to do with the motherboard you are running physically on your machine, or GPU drivers, stuff like that. Just get rid of any of that junk that doesn't make sense to be running in a VM. And as you're uninstalling programs, sometimes you might see a message about how you have to restart. You can just ignore for now any of those restarts. You'll do that after you've uninstalled everything. And remove any network-related programs that don't make sense, maybe some old Wi-Fi programs, VPN-related stuff. Okay, I removed a bunch of programs. Now, another kind of cleanup-related thing we can do is go to Settings, Control Panel, Administrative Tools, Services, and what you do here will depend on what you're looking to do in the VM, and you can turn off some of these, disable them. For instance, Print Spooler. I know I don't ever need that here in the VM, so I'm going to set that to disabled, and I know I don't need telephony. So anyway, just something to think about. There are various services you probably won't need, so you'll need to look into what doesn't make sense in your situation. Those are just a couple I can think of that I definitely don't need. There are some others too, but for now I'll just keep that as is. Now I'm going to go to my computer and get rid of some junk here. For instance, I have these old shared network folders from when I was studying at the Naval Postgraduate School. So I'm going to go to disconnect this one as well. I don't need sharing on this shared documents folder. So properties, sharing, uncheck here, apply, okay. And apparently this folder is always there, you can't delete it. But anyway, I turned off sharing on it. And I'm going to close out of here. See if there's anything in here we don't need. Fine. Now I'm going to go to Start, Settings, Network Connections. Here's some mobile modem connection. Definitely don't need that. So delete, yes. And here we have two VMware network connections fired up. It doesn't make sense to be using two, so just disable one. In VM settings, notice how you have these two network adapters. And by the way, if you're not getting network, you might want to change one of them to NAT. I noticed on the Mac side, I actually could only connect with NAT. In this case, looks like I can connect with bridged. So I'm going to disable one of them. Disable. And then check the internet connection to make sure it doesn't break anything. Yes, you can use the internet in XP in a VM. It's not going to break your computer. It's not going to make your computer suddenly disappear. Just don't do anything stupid on the internet in XP. Don't download suspicious files. Don't enter personal data anywhere. Okay, so I'm online. Confirming that. Now I'm going to shut down the virtual machine so we can make some configuration changes. So I'm going here, shut down guest, shut down. I think I'll stop seeing this message when I reboot because something I uninstalled should prevent this from happening. I think this is related to the Asus AI suite that was installed. Anyway, wait for it to do its thing and then hit end now. So you shut down the VM, and now what you want to do is go to VM, Settings, on the memory, change this to whatever makes sense in your case. I'm going to bump this memory up to 4 gigabytes. You'll want to have some kind of compromise between what the real machine, what the host will use, and what you need to use in the VM. And this obviously depends on how much physical memory you have. I have 64 gigabytes, so allocating 4 gigabytes to the VM is fine. I could probably bump that up even more, say 8. And then under processors, so far it's set to 4 cores. I have an Intel i7-14700K. I can choose up to 16 for now. I'll keep it at 4. And by the way, I'll show you what you need to do in order to have more cores available in the VM. Everything else you can keep as is. Make sure this is unchecked. That won't work with WinXP. Trust me, I tried and got a blue screen. I have 3 hard disks. You might have something different. This corresponds to however many disks you converted when using VMware Converter on the actual machine. So I had a system disk, an audio disk, and a samples disk. And you can change the disk capacity of the virtual disk by checking expand and bring it up or down. I'll keep it as is for now. And likewise with the other disks, you can change their size as needed. CD, DVD. I don't have a need for this at the moment, so I'm just going to hit remove. You can always re-add it later. Network adapters I'll keep as is, bridged. I could even remove one of them, but for now I'll just keep this as is. USB controller. In WinXP, I don't think we're able to use USB 3, so I'm going to keep this set to 2.0 for now. Sound card, I'm going to keep this as is. I'll choose that later as a USB device. Printer, I'm just going to remove this. Also, it's been discontinued anyway, so no need for that here. Display, if you have the option here, check off Accelerate 3D Graphics. Notice here we can choose up to 2 gigabytes of shared GPU graphics. I'll show you how to increase that amount. Now go to Options. Under Shared Folders, I'm going to enable it, and I'm going to add a folder. You see this message, I'm going to hit Next. I'm going to browse to the folder on the Windows machine that I want to share. For instance, Documents. Okay. I'll name it in the VM so I don't get confused by the host documents folder and the VM documents folder. Finish. Then here I'm going to check Map as Network Drive in Windows. So I don't have to do that manually. It should then appear in the VM. I'm not going to do anything with snapshots. Auto Protect, I'm not going to do anything. Guest Isolation, I'm going to keep as is. Enable drag and drop and copy and paste. Access control, I'm just going to keep this as unencrypted for now. I'm not paranoid about people trying to access my machine and get secret data from me that they can use against me somehow. Some of these others I'm not going to go through. I mainly want to show you the ones that are most applicable to getting things up and running smoothly. Under Advanced, if you don't want to see that message about side channel mitigations every time the VM starts, then choose here, Disable Side Channel Mitigations, hit OK. And because I deleted some stuff in the XP when I uninstalled programs, I can reclaim that disk space on the virtual disk by going to VM, Manage, Clean Up Disks, Clean Up Now. So it's showing reclaimable space, 110 megabytes. Okay. Now this is a little different than it was on the Mac. We want to change the VM hardware version. On the Mac we could do that directly in that settings panel. Here in Windows on VMware Workstation, to do that you have to go to VM, Manage, change hardware compatibility. You see this window, next. It's set to 11.x. I'm going to change this to Workstation 17.5 or later. That way, XP and this VM can take advantage of the most recent hardware that exists today, to the extent possible anyway. Now notice some of these limitations have changed. For instance, now 8 gigabytes of shared graphics memory, 32 processors. Next, I'm going to choose Alter this virtual machine. I don't want to clone anything. Next, Finish, Close. And now if you go back to VM, Settings, Processors, notice here how it's changed from having a maximum of 16 now up to 32. So what you choose here obviously depends on your compromise between giving the VM resources and having those resources allocated for the host machine. I'm just going to choose 16 and see if that works. And if you go to Display again, now under graphics memory, notice you can choose up to 8 gigabytes, which I'll do. Now hit OK. Now let's boot back into WinXP in the VM. And it looks like it's not booting up. I noticed on the Mac side, after I made those configuration changes, it wouldn't boot the first time after I hit the little green boot arrow. And I can't close out of the VM at this point. I'll get this message about how it's still powered on. So I hit powered off. And now I'm gonna rerun the VMware Workstation. Click on the VM. And again, try to boot it up. Looks like display related settings got reset. So I'm gonna right click, Properties, Settings. I guess it thinks I really want 640 by 480. I don't. I think I'll try 1920 by 1080. Yes. Okay. Now let's do a couple other tests, make sure everything's working as it should. Go to My Computer. Here's the shared folder showing up. Go to My Network Places. Entire network, VMware shared folders, VMware host, shared folders. There's that folder we share, so that's another way to get to it. But because we chose that option to map network drive, it's easier that way because we just have it available under my computer. Something else I want to show you is how to connect devices. There are a couple ways to go about it. On the bottom you see some of these icons, and if you have a USB drive attached to the computer, it should show up here. Also, if you go to VM removable devices, you can connect things that way. For instance, I have a USB drive plugged in, so I'll connect it. And yes, I understand it'll now be unconnected from the host. Yes, I understand. And now if I go to my computer, I should see that USB drive. Not sure why it's not there. It's connected. It's also showing up here. Okay, so maybe it just needed some time. Now it's showing up under my computer. Same applies for any other USB devices you might have under removable devices. That's where you'll see them. I have some dongles that I need for some music production programs, my audio card, some additional USB drives. So that's how you connect devices. And I'll try to drag over some file under downloads. It's not working, and I'm not sure why. Okay, it didn't work at first, but it worked the second time, so you might have to try twice. There it is, it worked. So I'm going to delete it. And remember, when you delete things from the VM, you can reclaim that space by going to VM, Manage, Clean Up Disks, and then do that when it's powered off. Now let's try the other direction. So I'm going to drag some file from the VM to the host desktop. And here it is. Now I'll delete it. Okay, let's test copy and paste. So I'll just choose some file on my desktop here, Control C, and here on the desktop, Control V. There it is. Now I'll delete it. Let's try the other direction. So I'll copy some file, the desktop with Control C, here in the VM, Control V, and there it is. I'll delete it. Now at this point you can actually run a benchmark. So I'm going to go to Google Chrome. I'm going to type Geekbench Legacy. We can't run a new version of Geekbench. Legacy versions, Advanced, Proceed. And here we have Geekbench 2 for Windows. Notice it requires SP3 relator. So it's downloaded. Yes, I'll keep it. I'm not afraid. And I'll run it. Run. Next. Next. Install. Finish. It's going to run automatically. Later. Okay, so now we can run a benchmark. Okay, so now we have a result. Internet Explorer does not want to open the link. It thinks it might be unsafe. But Google Chrome will let me open that. So copy that in. Advanced. Proceed. Okay, and there's that result. So it's pretty wild if you think about it, that you can revisit some older OS you have on a system that you might just not be comfortable running it on anymore. It's maybe getting old, you're worried about failures, so you bring it into a VM. And now it's like revisiting an old American muscle car and upgrading it with newer technology, but still keeping that older retro vibe. So at this point, I've showed you everything you need to do to convert Windows XP on a physical computer to run as a VM in VMware Workstation. I'm also going to do some additional testing, show how music production and video editing programs can work here in the VM. If this doesn't apply to you, you can just end the video here. Now I'm going to do the same kind of testing that I did when I showed you how to do all this on the Mac side in Mac Sonoma using VMware Fusion. So I'm going to test that Cubase SX3 is working fine, as well as Vegas Pro, so that I confirm I can revisit music production and video editing projects here in the VM. So I'm going to double click Cubase SX3, but before I do that I need to go to VM, removable devices, and connect these dongles. Here's one of them, WIBU box U, so connect, okay, go back, removable devices. Also I have this eLicenser protected executor. They couldn't have come up with a less diabolical name, I guess. Connect. Okay. And now I should be able to launch Cubase SX3. At this point, you may see a hardware detected window pop up regarding the dongles if you have a dongle. In my case, I'm not seeing it. Not sure why, but I'm going to try to launch Cubase. Initializing protection. Gets past that. We're in good shape. Okay. It didn't detect the device, but at the same time, we saw this hardware wizard window pop up, so I'm going to have to cancel out of Cubase. Here, I'm going to hit yes. Next. Next. Finish. So that was one USB dongle. There should be a second one. Here it is. Yes. Next. Next. Finish. And now it should be good to open Cubase. Initializing protection. This time it got through, so we're in good shape. I'll ignore this multimedia message here. Alright, so Cubase dongle is working, we're in here. I'm going to open an old project that I've been meaning to revisit. Here it is, open. Some message about physical memory getting low, but I'm not worried about that. UAD plugin is not going to work because I'm not using the UAD1 DSP PCI card, so that's expected. This project has MIDI in audio, and so I can do a good test of that functionality. First, I'm going to go to Devices, VST Instruments, and I wasn't sure if I would have to reauthorize some of these plugins, but they seem to be here just fine. Atmosphere, for instance, I'll click here. It loads up. So that's great that everything is still authorized. I don't have to redo anything. And then I can add another instrument here to test that other dongle. Culture is a plugin that requires a dongle, so I'll add that. And if that other dongle wasn't working, I would have seen a message here when I launched Culture. So both of the dongles are working just fine, so that's great. Now I'm going to go to Devices again, this time Device Setup. And under Audio Bay, I'm going to choose the Fireface USB. I've already installed those Army Babyface Pro drivers. That's why I'm seeing that in the list here. But in order for things to actually work, I need to go to VM, Movable Devices, and connect to the Babyface Pro. And when I do that, I'm going to lose audio here. I'm recording with some screen recording software, and so I have audio input here. But once I choose here, the RME, I'm going to lose audio. And I'll have to do a little bit of a workaround for that I'll show you in a minute. So I'm going to connect. Okay. Okay, so I'm back, and now I have the audio input going into Reaper, coming through the Army Babyface Pro. So I have to turn on phantom power here for the microphone, the same way it was on the host system. And now on the host, I no longer have that audio input. So that's one of the drawbacks of using audio in a VM. There are workarounds using virtual cables, but in my case, I'll just turn things on and off as I need them, whether I'm in the host or in the VM. And now, in order to play back a Cubase project and actually hear it, I need to do some audio routing. What I'm going to do is, in Cubase, go to Devices, Device Setup, and first choose the RME, that's this Fireface USB device here, switch, and then OK, then go back to Devices, VST Connections, and for outputs, I'm going to change this to ADAT1 for the left, and then ADAT2 for the right. I'll close out of here. And now, here in Reaper, I have this track to take audio input from a program like Cubase or something, and I'm going to record from ADAT 1 and 2. So that's made possible because with an audio interface like the Babyface Pro or any RME product, and I think other manufacturers have similar capabilities, I can go to a given output. In this case, AS12 on the Babyface is what corresponds to that ADAT12 output. So I click here, and I can choose Loopback, and that's what enables Cubase to output its audio through this output here on the Babyface Pro, and then for that output to then get rerouted to an input, where the input corresponds to the output. So ADAT12 here corresponds to input ADAT12 here. So that done, I'm going to choose a place in this piece where I had a few things going on at once. MIDI, audio, so here for instance. And now when I hit play, the audio should show up. And I'm listening with my headphones now. Here we go. And that's very loud. Okay, so my eardrums almost got blown out, but now I'm seeing the Cubase input here. I'm hearing the audio. I can reduce the recorded input level by lowering that output in total mix. That completely wipes it out. So everything's working, all the plugins are outputting audio, everything's looking good, and this is a pretty good first test to confirm that I can revisit my old audio projects in Cubase. I can work on them here in the VM. I can create stems and then get them into, say, Logic Pro on the Mac. Tons of options available, and in a lot of cases it's going to make more sense to just stay here in the project and not convert it. I have 40 projects, some of them are going to be quite difficult to convert given some of the plugins they're using. So here I have total freedom, and there's a little bit of a retro aspect to it, revisiting the old projects on the original programs I was using at the time, which is kind of cool. And with that out of the way, let's revisit a video editing project and see that that's looking fine on the VM. So I'm going to go to an old Vegas Pro project. This is something I've been meaning to revisit and finish up. This was a final project for a cinematography class when my wife and I were living on the Adriatic coast in Montenegro. So here it is, the project file. I'm going to double click that to open it in Vegas. Some error here regarding a DLL. I noticed that happened on the Mac side, and then every time I reloaded Vegas, I no longer saw that error. Not sure what that's about, but it doesn't seem to impact anything. So the project loaded, and it looks pretty awful. That's because when I was running the project on the actual XP machine, I had to set this preview quality to draft quarter, which is the worst possible option. So the first thing I can do is try to set that to the best option. So go to best, full, and see if I can scrub through the timeline, which I can. So that's fine. And now, likewise with what we did on Cubase, I need to make sure that Vegas is outputting audio to that ADAT12 output on the Army Babyface Pro. So I'm going to go to Options, Preferences, Audio Device, and choose the Army Babyface Pro, which is here. And I'm going to change these outputs to ADAT12. Probably just need to deal with the stereo one for now. But anyway, I've changed them all. Apply. Okay, and now I should be able to hit play and have audio coming into Reaper. So I'll find a place in the project that had a lot of activity around here and hit play and see what happens. Hopefully I didn't forget to do anything. Okay, so we have audio coming in. Listening through my headphones, everything is fine. Okay, so that looks fine. The project is playing back at this best quality and the audio is coming in. This has been a good test that I can go back to a video editing project in XP in the VM, much like I could with music production projects in XP in the VM, with the added benefit of increased performance. And in doing so, it's been this retro creativity kind of time machine trip going back to those projects. And it's given me this creative surge that I haven't felt in a while, something that no software update or AI assist button on some program will ever give me. And I think that's an important lesson here, that we creative types, we're sort of like antennas, where we just need to let that antenna be oriented to pick up those creativity signals. Sometimes our antenna gets pointed off direction and we have to recalibrate, get things back on track, whether it's revisiting the past or allowing yourself to be in tune with something in the present that can give inspiration. So apart from learning the technicalities here of how to convert an XP machine into VMware Workstation, hopefully you also gain appreciation for what this kind of procedure can perhaps do for your own creativity. So thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, and until next time.